Consider how different the narrative is here, or rather how familiar it is, quite frankly, because I argue that this poem is inventing movies considerably before movies were actually a thing. Look at the way it tells a story. The storytelling style is cinematic. Images are driving the story more than just about anything else. At the beginning of the drama, on I think it's tablet 2, it is Enkidu has been initiated into his humanity, if we can use that euphemism, by Shamhat. And at one point, he is walking, or he is heading loosely towards Uruk with this general plan of showing up and maybe kicking some butt. But he and Shamhat run across this traveler who says that, or who tells this little story about how Gilgamesh is about to crash a wedding and rape the bride. And Enkidu, we're told, has his face go pale. Think about that. We're not told that he was outraged by this. There is no narrator stepping in. It is, in essence, a close-up on Enkidu's face and the blood draining out of it. That is storytelling through a visual mode in a poem. And then you get this, what in editing you would call a hard cut, to Enkidu walking towards the fight. We're told the next thing, Enkidu walked in front, Shamhat walked behind. That very next line. And in between, there is a decision being made. In between, there is stuff happening. In between, there is a processing of information and a conclusion drawn from that. And all of that is elided, erased, so that you get just the prompt, which is the news and his face going pale, and then the result, which is the walk. That's editing. That is somebody piecing together strips of information into a sequential line, allowing for the strength that comes from contrast and that rapid fire narrative development. That's editing theory, quite frankly. That's every movie you've ever seen. That's a montage, as is generally called, where those pieces of information are often strapped together without all of the connecting material, without all of the connective tissue that you might expect in like a long novel form. But those simple images of this thing and then the other creates a kind of connection between them and relies on the viewer, the reader, the receiver, the listener, the audience, whatever you want to call them, to make those connections themselves and thus become more involved in the narrative. And that's just editing. Think in terms of the cinematic scope of this, where on Enkidu's deathbed, and here this translation has one interpretation on it, but the basics of the narration of Enkidu's dying is that afterwards, Gilgamesh is so distraught, he just stares at Enkidu's body for days on end. And he is only then convinced that his friend is really gone when he sees a maggot crawling out of Enkidu's nose, which is disgusting, but it is tiny. And think about that. That is, we spoke about the close-up on Enkidu's face. This is what is known as an extreme close-up of a nostril and a worm within the nostril. It is tiny. Now think about that and this momentous moment in the drama contrasted to so much else in this poem, which is enormous scale. When Enkidu and Gilgamesh fight, they are leveling whole city blocks. That huge widescreen extravaganza of the drama is contrasted to this minute, little, tiny image of the maggot. That dynamism is remarkable. And at the very end, we're told that Enkidu, or rather Gilgamesh, lies down to sleep with Utnapishtim and his wife, and he is supposed to sleep for a set period of time, several days, and it's very important that he not wake up in between that. Enkidu, or Utnapishtim and his wife, want to keep an eye on him and make sure he doesn't wake up in that time so that they can send him home, but they don't know how. So they come up with this ruse to bake bread every day and leave it by his head so that when he wakes up, he finds the bread, he'll be hungry, he'll eat. And then if they come back and he's asleep again, they will know he has been awake because the bread will be gone, or at least it'll be, eaten up. And when they do come back, they see and they itemize the different versions of each loaf. They describe each loaf of bread in that frozen moment of time. And of course, the oldest loaf is pretty mangy by then. And then the second loaf is is just a little moldy. And then the next youngest loaf, or oldest loaf, or whatever it is, would be just a little crusty, perhaps a little stale, all the way up until the freshest one that was just put there. It's hot out of the stove. That image is contrasted. Those one little images gives that sense of a passage of time. So instead of the poem coming and saying, and time passed, and days came and went, and we had all of this, and all of that, think of Genesis and the comparison, and on the first day this happened, and on the second day this happened. Here you're getting a very specific indication of the passage of time strictly through the images. That attention is cinematic. This poem, in many respects, exercises a kind of storytelling that won't really come to the fore until the early 20th century. Think about that. So there you have a literary analysis. There you have a dramatological analysis, a specifically cinematic analysis of this poem. You can apply all of these different frames as ways into the poem to start making judgments about it, to start making assumptions about it, to start finding your way into how to appreciate it. And you can make all different sorts of assumptions about that. Well, the bit about the contrast and the and the having one thing and then the other, and not having the connective material in between. That's just a larger metaphor or example of the fact that this is all imprinted on tablets, and fractured tablets, and sometimes with missing tablets, and all of this. The complications of the narrative to begin with are all included in your interpretation of the of this cinematic editing style. All of this is valid as a way of judging all of this. But it's just about getting in that first step into the poem so that you can start to make meaning, and make meaning for yourself, rather than approaching the poem as saying, the poem is saying something, I need to figure it out. No. The poem is saying something, you need to help it say what you need it to say for you.